Don't they look good?
Nice to see you. Are y'all hot and sweaty? Yeah. You're wearing.
We're cool as cucumbers over here, dude.
I know, and you're wearing the perfect dress for
I
this.
mean, it kind of doesn't touch me.
It's exactly.
Perfect.
What?
Good to go?
Okay,
We're good to
I'll
go.
let you guys.
Right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out. Grab a seat if there is one. If not, there's standing room in the garage door. I'm Rebecca West, publisher of the Montreal Review of Books and executive director of ALAC, the Association of English Language Publishers of Quebec, our parent organization. Thank you all for joining us on this sweltering July evening. We're all melting, but we're having fun. Thank you to Ellen, Ethan, Alex, everyone at Will's for having us in their beautiful bar. And thanks to anyone tuning in online. Hello. As publisher of the MRB and on a more personal note, as a white settler with ancestral roots in the Netherlands and Ireland, I'd like to acknowledge that we're gathered in a place known as Jojage in the Kanien'kehá:ka language and Muniang in the language of the Anishinaabe. Our association represents a diverse community who live and work on the territories of many Indigenous peoples, including the Kanien'kehá:ka, Abenaki, Anishinaabe, and Huron-Wendat. And as a publication celebrating local stories, we really acknowledge the first storytellers of these lands. I'd like to thank our dedicated MRB team for putting this beautiful issue together. Malcolm Fraser, Emily Rain, Selena Wiener, David LeBlanc, Michael Weil, all of our great reviewers and illustrators, as well as our board of directors. Woo! Yeah, I think a few of you may be here tonight. Also, special guest Anna Leventhal in from Winnipeg. Hello, very exciting. Yeah. I'd like to express gratitude to our funders, the Government of Canada's Canada Book Fund, the Canada Council for the Arts, and SODEC, as well as all of our loyal advertisers. We have a lovely event lined up for you this evening with five writers featured in the summer issue: John Reibetanz, Maxime, Rutland, Valérie Bah, and Kama La Mackerel. Thank you to Andreas and everyone at Paragraph Books for providing the book sales. If you have not picked up a book yet, please do so. They're back there. The authors will be available for signings after the readings. A couple other quick announcements. As many of you know, sadly, we lost a member of our publishing community earlier this year when Judy Isherwood, founder of Shoreline Press, passed away in January. Judy was a dedicated member of the Association of English Language Publishers of Quebec, having served as our president for many years. Or several years, sorry, in her memory and in her honor of her book, Historical Walking Tour of St. Anne de Bellevue. One of our member publishers, Sarah Robinson of Corner Studio, is organizing a walking tour this Saturday in St. Anne de Bellevue at 11 a.m. The meeting point is in front of Simon Fraser House, and we have a few little flyers here for anyone who may want to join. I hope you can make it. In other exciting news, I'm pleased to announce that we are hiring at the MRB and ALAC. We are looking for a production coordinator at ALAC and an associate editor at the MRB. So if you're interested or know someone who maybe, come say hi after the readings. And the postings are up on our websites. So without further ado, before I melt, please join me in welcoming our editor, Malcolm Fraser.
Thanks, Rebecca, and thanks everyone for coming out on such a hot night. It's great to have you here. We have some MRB heavy hitters in the place. Founding editor Kimberly Bourgeois, longtime co-editor Ian McGillis, longtime publisher Anna Leventhal, all the way from Winnipeg. Athena Khalid, former associate editor, recently departed. And I got to give a special shout out to Emily Rain, who was associate editor before I was, and parachuted in to help us with this issue. Thank you very much. We couldn't have done it without you. It's much appreciated. I'm very happy with this issue. We got a really nice cover by Rakim Jah. It's chock full of reviews as usual. There's what did I want to say about these? There's some for people who say we don't publish critical reviews, attachez vos trucs, because there's a couple of scorchers in here. And I guess the other thing was just that we have, I think, 5 new writers debuting in this issue. So I was kind of excited about that. Anyway, I guess we'll get things started. I'll introduce our first readers. We have Valérie Bah is a Jojaka-based filmmaker and writer. Their work explores intergenerational trauma and healing, as well as mundane radical acts of survival. Valérie Bah's book, The Rage Letters, is out soon from Metonomy Press. With the vagaries and foibles of the publishing world, we don't have the copies on hand tonight, so you can consider this a special preview. We do have the French version, Les Enragés, and we also have Kama La Mackerel, translator. Kama La Mackerel is an educator, visual artist, performer, writer, and translator who works between and across English, French, and Mauritian Creole. They are the author of the award-winning poetry collection Zomfam, which we do have also for sale tonight, and have lectured, performed, and exhibited their work internationally. So I want to welcome Valérie and Kama to do some reading from The Rage Letters. Back and forth between the two as you wish.
I can hold them.
Do you want to sit or stand? Up to you.
Yeah, thank you. Oui, je plonge. Okay. So this short story is good.
Hello. This is good.
I can't hear myself. So.
No.
Okay.
Hello. Test. Hello. This is hello. Oh yeah, now I can hear myself.
Cool. All right. Okay. Yeah, let's dive in. This short story is entitled Theft. Imagine for a moment that you're in grade 3. You steal books right off the shelves. It begins with fines from the school library that keep dragging out, and it gradually escalates into shoplifting. All of this serves a higher purpose, to expand your secret stash. In the centerfold in a book on aquatic life, an image of a beached colony of seals reminds you of a greasy plate of griot. There's also an illustrated encyclopedia filled with naked human bodies, the genitalia of which you ogle before drawing clothes over them.
You fail la dictée. Mon école, mon ami, mes amis. À mon école, on fait du bricolage, des dessins et des peintures. On joue ensemble dans la cour de récréation. J'ai plein d'amis. J'aime mon école.
When you're finally barred from borrowing books, you hide in the library stacks, slipping comics under your sweater or into your pants. Then you trudge toward the exit under the gaze of the librarian. You can't stand her, but you can't win. She suspects you right away and rats you out, which only makes you want to steal more. Your school bag and locker function as a waiting zone for your loot, en route to your damp basement, that lawless refuge. That's where the real work begins. A Frankensteinian experiment, courtesy of Scholastic Canada Limited. Cut, paste, layout, rageful lamination with swipes of a glue stick or scotch tape, spawning your beautiful creatures. Child of 1,000 secrets, Prometheus in school clothes, you give these pages a life they could never have expected. A book is just raw material to dissect, debone, to create anew. The results venture towards the grotesque. Once glorious works of art, glossy paged magazines, picture books, watercolor fables, new age comics, end up discarded by a pile of laundry.
You fail la dictée. Ville, centre, explorateur, communautaire. J'aime ma ville. Il y a un parc, une banque et un centre communautaire. Les avenues de mon quartier sont toutes nommées pour honorer des explorateurs célèbres. L'avenue où j'habite porte le nom d'un explorateur. Mon ami aussi habite sur une avenue qui est nommée après un explorateur très célèbre.
You try to keep a low profile in the school corridors, nurturing the who, me look of a withdrawn weirdo, the loner who chases pigeons at recess. It doesn't take long for the librarian to reach out to your teacher about the increasing fines and her unfettered suspicions. Her meddling triggers a complete ban from the library, with accusations that follow you home. The day the school administration calls your mother to summon her to a meeting, she furrows her brows. What's this again? Bothering people? They've got nothing better to do? You barely react, fearful of her temper, of her mood swings, the trepidation that underlies the white woman voice she dons on the phone, her muffled whispers when you call her at work to mediate some fight over the TV remote. She knows that at the root of any institutional mise en scène in this country is the stench of discrimination, an understanding that spreads everywhere like maskriti oil. Qui ça y ouvle? No matter the cost, she opposes the unending waves of messages from the school, intimating that the failings of her 5 children, listing their deficits, real or imagined, continuously suggesting that she does not belong here, while she works tirelessly as an administrative assistant in a nondescript office that unfailingly tells her the same thing.
You fail la dictée, famille, histoire, livre, souhait. Maryse vit avec sa grand-mère, sa grande sœur, son petit frère et son oncle qui étudient en informatique. Elle fait la vaisselle et la cuisine. Elle ne va pas à l'école, mais adore les histoires. Quand on apporte des livres dans son quartier, elle y va toujours, même si on se moque d'elle. Son plus grand souhait est que tous les enfants puissent aller à l'école et apprendre avec des amis.
On the day of the appointment, your mother takes a day off work to accompany you to school. She combs your hair into a bun so tight, so elegant that it mirrors hers. Both your dignity and your rage are plastered to your head with extra strength fixative gel and a mist of lustrous pink oil sheen spray. Protective headgear is a requisite for the proceeding that awaits you. Upon your arrival at the administration office, you notice her voice, her precise register. Her tone foretells a fight. Her whole body says, "What right do you have to blame my daughter, and by extension, my person and everything that we are?" When the principal welcomes her into his office, you are relegated to a chair in the reception area. For about half an hour, you watch the secretary sip her coffee, cheerfully lip-sync to soft rock on a local radio station, and help a first grader who's shit his pants. As if watching through a double-sided mirror, you feel covertly initiated into the school's inner workings. When he emerges with your mother from the office, the principal seems tense and irritated. So does your mother, but in a different way. Some strands have been dislodged from her hairdo. It looks like she's fuming, but she also seems somewhat depleted. You barely remember what the principal mumbles on his way out. All you know is that your library loan privileges have been reinstated. You can keep up your little gimmick. That morning, back in class, coiffed with the bun of glory, you draw your classmates' attention as they put away their books for yet another vocab test. Why are you so fancy today? Where were you this morning? Shh, get your notebooks out, orders the teacher. You put the questions to rest with a shrug. My mother was fighting racists.
You fail la dictée.
Thank you so much, Valérie and Kama. I have many things to ask at the when the Q&A part comes along. Well, I guess we'll just jump right into our very next readers. Their new book, Out to Defend Ourselves, A History of Montreal's First Haitian Street Gang, is out from Fernwood Publishing, and it's available at the table over there in the back. It's got a fan pointing right at it, too, so it's a good place to stand. Maxime Aurélien is the former leader of Les Bélangers, Montreal's first Haitian street gang, and the owner of Cash Content, a pawn shop and barber shop in Montreal's East End. And Ted Rutland is a professor at Concordia University. His research and activism focuses on the racial politics of urban planning and policing in Canadian cities. He's the author of Displacing Blackness, Planning Power and Race in 20th Century Halifax. Maxime and Ted, welcome. Do you want the cordless mic, or I'll do that one? Sure.
Yeah. My mom was fighting racists. That's going to be the theme of the first two parts of tonight anyway. So I'm really happy to see all of you. Thanks so much for Montreal Review of Books for organizing this event. Thanks to Taylor Noakes for writing a really great review of the book in this month's issue. Thanks to Fiona Jeffries, who is here somewhere from Fernwood, who did an amazing job editing this. And so Maxime and I are going to read little bits from the book. We try to do a bunch of different things in the book. And one of them is to talk about the landscape of racism and violence in 1970s and 1980s Montreal. The book is called Out to Defend Ourselves. So the first section that I'm going to read is going to talk about what it was that people had to defend themselves from. Why did people have to go and fight white racists? Well, I should also say, most of the book is written in the first person. So when I say I or we, I wasn't there. We use that form to kind of convey some of the emotional intensity of the things that are happening. Our lives started to change in high school, in part because we started to venture beyond our neighborhood. In Saint-Léonard and Montreal Nord, where we played basketball on the weekends, things were tough. There were fewer Haitians in Saint-Léonard than in Saint-Michel, and they faced constant insults and threats from the white majority, both white Quebecers and Italians. There were more Italians in Saint-Léonard than in Saint-Michel, roughly double the number, and I guess they thought it was their neighborhood. The Italians there were as bad or worse than the white Quebecers. My friend T. Rouge, who lived in Saint-Léonard, explained the situation to me on my first day at the local high school, Saint-Ex, and my friends and I experienced it firsthand when we started playing basketball in the neighborhood. Groups of older youth, either Quebecers or Italians, would drive up to the park in their cars and shout insults and threats while we played. Look at the N-words. Go back to your country, they'd yell. We knew if we talked back, they'd attack us, and so we tried to ignore their taunts as much as possible. We learned to stick together. We always went to Saint-Léonard in a group, never alone. Montreal Nord was also tough. There's a sector of Montreal Nord today where Haitians represent 25 to 30% of the population, but we were still a tiny minority there in the 70s, maybe 5% of the population in the densest northeast sector. My friend Marcus, who moved to Montreal Nord from Haiti in 1975, remembers how isolated Haitians felt at the time. Quote, "There was my family, a friend of my dad's, and a few girls around the corner. Those were the only Haitians then," he says. "I used to walk around the neighborhood looking for other Haitians, but I didn't find any. We were really alone," end quote. Still, some white Quebecers thought there were too many. Frédéric Boiron, who arrived in Montreal Nord in 1972, remembers the violence he and his friends faced. Quote, "There were white people who came after us just for the pleasure of beating up black people," he recalls. "It was impossible to walk at night in Montreal Nord as a black person then. Impossible," end quote. Haitian students at the majority high school, the major neighborhood high school, École Henri Bourassa, were regularly insulted by white professors and attacked by white students, leading to a major confrontation called a riot in the media in 1983. It was just as bad or perhaps worse at the other local high school, Calixa-La-Vallée, where vocational programs for adults were offered. White adults studying cooking, auto mechanics, or other trades thought nothing of insulting or intimidating Haitian students several years younger than them. The same thing was happening in neighborhoods across Montreal at the time. In Hochelaga, white bikers threatened and attacked the few black residents of the area, which eventually led to pitched battles in the streets. In Petit Patrie, gangs of white youth terrorized the few black residents of the area. In 1975, a gang of white youth, sometimes over 100 of them, started attacking black residents periodically, imposing what the Journal de Montréal called a climate of terror. Haitian residents simply walking down the streets were insulted, swarmed, and severely beaten. In one incident, a gang of white youth broke down the front door of a Haitian couple's home, ransacked the apartment, and beat up the male occupant. My friend Josué, who lived in Petit Patrie at the time, remembers constantly encountering white racists on the bus. Quote, "On a single bus trip, say from Petit Patrie to Saint-Michel, we might have 3 or 4 fights," he recalls. "We get attacked by older white youth. We defend ourselves as best we could, and then we'd get off the bus and catch another, because when the police arrived, they'd always blame us. So we'd have to catch 3 or 4 buses to travel a single route. It was always like that," end quote. And now I'll pass it to Maxime, qui va lire un peu en français.
Bonjour. Moi, je vais vous lire le... Juste baisser un petit peu le micro. OK, merci. Notre première sortie au centre-ville constituait une nouvelle expérience passionnée pour nous. On avait enfin plus de 18 ans et on avait donc accès au monde inédit comprenant des bars et d'autres lieux. Le premier endroit qui nous a attirés au centre-ville a été le Palladium, où se trouvait une piste pour faire du patinage à roulettes au coin de Berry de Montigny, situé dans un centre de conférence reconverti. Le Palladium était immense, avec une vaste patinoire au centre, des comptoirs, des restaurants, des salles de jeu. Surtout, le pourtour, il attirait plus de 400 personnes la plupart des soirs et jusqu'à 1000 personnes les vendredis et les samedis. La foule était composée des jeunes, principalement des adolescents âgés et des jeunes adultes. Il y avait des gens de tous les horizons, des blancs, des noirs, des bruns. La musique disco était alors très populaire. C'était la musique que les gens avaient en tête lorsqu'ils pensaient aux patins à roulettes. À cette époque, à cause des films hollywoodiens tels que Roller Boogie en 1979, Skate Town, USA 1979, le Palladium s'était relié à ce mouvement. La musique disco retentissait dans le système audio, tandis que les lumières colorées clignotaient sur les visages et les corps des gens. Y rentrer, c'était comme pénétrer dans un tout autre univers, une énergie toute vous animait, un sentiment de possibilité tellement des gens. Le Palladium était devenu notre destination du vendredi soir d'habitude. On se trouvait d'abord à mon appartement pour boire quelques bières, fumer une coupe de joint, puis on allait tous ensemble en métro. Quelques heures après, ayant bien profité de notre moment de détente au Palladium, on retournait également ensemble à Saint-Michel. Cependant, le voyage de retour était une expérience différente. La gare Berry de Montigny, en fin de soirée, où est-ce qu'on se rassemblait à un zoo, la gare était une plaque tournante, car 3 lignes de métro y se croisaient et elles se remplissaient rapidement des passagers. De plus en plus, des personnes se rendaient à la gare pour passer le temps ou parce qu'ils avaient des affaires à régler. Les jeunes motards, avec leurs vestes en cuir et leurs barbes broussailleuses, se tenaient là pour vendre la drogue, manifestant leur présence. Les motards prenaient plaisir à nous insulter, à nous menacer dans les stations de métro, comme c'était le cas partout ailleurs, et on ne sortait jamais du métro sans être interpellé. Regardez les nègres sales. Nègres, retournez dans votre pays, hurlait-il. Ça faisait mal à chaque fois. Au Palladium, on avait le sentiment de faire partie de la ville, mais ensuite, ces paroles nous ramenaient à la réalité, nous rappelaient dans les wagons du métro et du chemin du retour. On devait donc endurer le harcèlement longtemps après avoir quitté la gare.
Okay, they'll hear? Okay, people watching online, sorry, it is so hot that the camera died. And so we're doing an intense emotional connection with the reading. And so obviously a lot of the book is about how Maxime and his friends organized to fight white racists, both to defend themselves and to defend the community. And so, combated these people that they found in metro stations, but also went to the defense of people around the city. And that's really, the thing I think that both of us really wanted to tell in the story. Because we're still in this moment where gangs are viewed as this exaggerated threat to public security, and the term gang functions as a racial category. We also wanted to criticize the making of this war on gangs. And the thing is, of course, that there have been gangs in Montreal going back to the mid-1800s, but it's only in the 1980s when Haitian gangs are formed to defend themselves against white racists that you have the beginning of a war on gangs. And so I'll just read 2 paragraphs from the conclusion. What is a gang? The question is more complicated than it seems. Montreal, for example, has a long history of what could be called gangs. In 1842, an article in Le Canadien newspaper complained that une bande de jeunes was terrorizing women in a commercial district of Montreal and called for their arrest. In the 1880s, there were numerous complaints about des bandes de voyous, who reportedly robbed businesses, assaulted people on the streets, and faced off against each other in what is now called the Old Port. In the 1960s, dozens of bandes de motards were formed in Montreal neighborhoods, with names like Hot Pistons and Satan's Choice. These bandes, while involved in various forms of petty crime, aroused public concern primarily for the violent conflicts between them and led the police to launch an investigation into their activities between 1968 and 1972. While all of these groups could be called gangs, it is significant that they were not. The word gang was used by the English media, but the French media, the Montreal police, and elected officials consistently used the French word bande. None of these white groups, moreover, led the police to create a special squad devoted to controlling or eliminating them. Les Bélangers and other Haitian groups were the first to be consistently called gangs. It was not the first term used. An internal police report in January 1989 used the English term street gangs in quotation marks, alongside the long-standing French term bande de voyous. This report, however, focused on groups from many racial and ethnic backgrounds, including many white Québécois groups, the racist groups that Les Bélangers was formed to confront. 7 months later, another internal police report introduced the term that has since become commonplace in Montreal, gang de rue. This report focused uniquely on Haitian groups, including Les Bélangers and Master B. The report warned that Haitian gangs were on the verge of becoming as powerful as les groupes de motards, group, not gangs, and led the police to create its first ever squad devoted to gang de rue in August 1989. The squad, initially composed of 12 officers, focused specifically on Haitian gangs in its first year of operation, and hundreds of Haitian youth were arrested for small offenses. The next year, the squad was enlarged to 20 officers and given a mission to, quote, do to the Jamaicans what we did to the Haitians, end quote. It was the beginning of a history that is yet to end, a police war on gangs where gang refers almost exclusively to Haitian and other black groups. While many other gangs have emerged in Montreal since the Bélangers, it is worth returning to the question, what is a gang? In general, what people call a gang today has little in common with les Bélangers. Tragically, the definition the police and the media falsely imposed on early Haitian gangs is the model that some gangs seek to replicate. There are reasons for this. People need to get by. But it feeds a vicious cycle in which gang violence produces a racist moral panic, boosts police budgets and power, expands the surveillance and repression of anyone who looks like a gang member, and worsens the social conditions that led people to form gangs in the first place. Any path beyond this cycle will require a potent movement against anti-black racism, a turn away from the police as a solution to violence and other social problems, and a sense of historical memory that retrieves the truth behind the contorted stories of the police and other dominant institutions. In this struggle, the history of Les Bélangers needs to be remembered, and its lessons carried into the present. If we find there is no place in the city for all of us, it is not by turning on those who face the same problems as us that will overcome this, but by supporting each other, having each other's back, and, when we need to, defending ourselves. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. No, we're done.
Thank you very much, Ted and Maxime, and we'll again, I'm sure, have many interesting things to discuss. I forgot to mention that the version française of the book, which is published at the same time, called Il fallait se défendre, is also available over at our literary souvenir table at the back of the room. So I want to introduce our third and final reader for tonight. John Reibetanz is a member of the League of Canadian Poets, a 3-time finalist for the National Magazine Awards. He's published 14 full collections and 2 chapbooks, been shortlisted for the National Relit Poetry Award, and won first prize in the International Petra Kenny Poetry Competition. The Essential John Reibetanz came out from Porcupine's Quill in 2017, and his most recent collection, called New Songs for Orpheus, is out from McGill-Queen's, and you can, of course, purchase it right here. John lives in Toronto and is a fellow at Victoria College. as well as a senior fellow at Massey College, and he kindly came down to join us for this event tonight, so please join me in welcoming him. I have this cordless mic if you prefer, or this one. Okay.
That's great. Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you, MRB, for inviting me tonight. We've been hearing about various kinds of injustice, and I'm afraid it's not going to stop right now because we've got another kind, basically, something that's been around a long, long time. It's our attitude to the rest of living creation. A couple of years ago, I wrote a poem called What We Owe the Stars. And primarily, of course, what we owe is something to dream on that's up there. This book, New Songs for Orpheus, could I suppose be subtitled What We Owe the Rest of Living Creation, because we've been in our self-conceited anthropomorphism been giving bad raps to the rest of creation. Sometimes it's delicately done, other times it's savagely. The book got its start from what a friend of mine, Don Mackay, said, that it was the dynamism of the natural world that animated the lyric in the first place. So to praise Orpheus, that central figure in Ovid, to praise Orpheus is equivalent to a cook taking credit for the sweetness of the plum and the bitterness of the lemon. It's out there to start with, and we've been borrowing it for centuries and millennia. So this is a kind of giving Orpheus his comeuppance, basically. And we start with a poem called Their Song, which has an epigraph that gives the traditional way of looking at things. With such songs, the bard of Thrace drew the trees, held beasts enthralled, and constrained stones to follow him. Well, I don't know. Their Song. For a change, Orpheus listens to the other musicians, once the hum of his lyre no longer hangs like moss from branches in the forest air, or in his ears arched groves. First he catches only louder instruments, as lungs bellow loss, echoing letdown of milk for departed calves, or a lamb's vibrato laments the passing of its soul spring. Then he makes out frogs' miniature bagpipes guzzling air before the dive beneath it to their long, cold, silent sostenuto in the pond's underworld. By nightfall, his ears pick up the bell-like notes of bats tolling their exile from light, and the staccato scream of breath through the reed flute of a death's head moth, tattooed with grief from birth. As each voice cries its lost Eurydice, the marriage of flesh and soul that ends too soon, Orpheus picks up his lyre again and sings the song of breath, which is theirs and his. And we've got another quote from Ovid as an epigraph to the next poem, Orphic Voice. Through those lips to which rocks listened and to which the hearts of savage beasts responded. Savage beasts, really? The soul breathed out went faring forth. We can never know whether rock listened to chanting voices while lips were blowing pigment onto cave walls, into which sound vanished forever, unlike the red ochre that has embraced rock for 30,000 years, singing animal songs to it. Some about creatures that have no other life except in song, aurochs and woolly mammoth, whose weaponed heads did not save them from dying out like echoes. Others who lingered long enough to enter another life in the cave of the human mind, where lions offer our dreams fleetness and daring, and where deer, freezing, give shape to our fears, in an installation of words more portable than frescoes, lips breathing out sounds that summon ghostly afterimages of breathers beyond the cave mouth. Some now far beneath the earth, among the tree roots' long winding caves, which imaged the underworld of language, its indirections, intersections, gnarled, unexpected rhythmical turns. If you listen closely, you will hear the breathed out souls lingering there, because they've imprinted themselves on our language, on the way we speak, on the way we think. And yet we've been giving them bad raps. And one of the creatures that we've really done an awful job on is the bat. We've turned them into batmen or vampires or all sorts of dark figures. And they didn't deserve it, if only because they were around long before we were. So Ovid says, houses, not forests, are their favorite haunts. Well, caves are their favorite haunts, actually. At first, they sought shelter there, millions of lifetimes before human voices echoed through caves, later given back to those winged refugees who'd fled snapping jaws in the forest. The resonant limestone walls became a recital hall, amplifying tiny sounds from throats hanging upside down, piping their high-pitched greetings, these felt-covered sacks of song. Their voices became their eyes, navigating the darkness more deftly than any bird, thin-boned wings sweeping upwards, the alert, oversized ears and panache of Fred Astaire. Light flashed behind them reveals a Venice of red canals flowing through wings more cape-like than butter or dragonfly. 1,000 beats per minute. No vampire, this dancing heart. And if you think bats have gotten a bad treatment, what about snakes? This is upon thy belly. We fear them because they are close to the earth, and we like to think of ourselves as above it all, spun from day gleam and night sparkle, abhorring their encounters with humus that will claim our corpses. A threat they face veiled in thin scales, their only visors see-through lids, their bodies tapered frugally, no paired appendages, one lung, the lithe forked tongue, no token of duplicity, but sensitive tester of airborne trafficking that escapes our body's radar. The sidewinding locomotion, no belly flop, but a head-first horizontal dive into streams of ground wind in the low countries beneath feet which are too intent on haste to swerve from lines we take. As we go upon our bellies, filling them with forests, draining lakes, bulldozing mountains, our jaws opening far wider than theirs. What would we give to be able to molt crawling out of ourselves, the old skin breaking near the mouth on something newer and brighter? And one of the parts of this book focuses on the same topic as that magnificent musical, Come From Away, which was all about the people in 9/11 who were stranded at Gander and the kind of welcome they were given. This is a poem that envisages what it might be like if you're a swift, that little bird way up there, looking down on the 38 airplanes that have been stranded. They must remind her of herself if she looks down on them from cloud height, those 38 grounded planes that owe their ancestry to her, along with the cleaving scythes splayed behind their snub-nosed cockpits. Would we have ever dreamt of flight unless her edged cry raised our eyes to the swoop and soar of those blades as they shear the evening's blue silk, yet leave its darkening waters seamless, as when a magician's assistant, after being sawn in two, emerges one again from the curtained box. The swift, still more deft than we, at living with conjuring, her muscles making minute and impromptu tweakings to stay abreast of waves on air's unseen seas, where our wings founder without the cockpit instruments that translate magic into math, and where winged dreams, when weaponized, leave two tall boxes, smoke surrounded. Her own dream was her second gift to us, not magic, but a glimpse through clouds where swifts drift half asleep, of how we might move weep, 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 from downcast eye to lifted throat, and turn it, like hers, into song. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. John, have a seat here, if you will. And I'd like to invite up our other readers as well to answer a few questions. So, John, I'll start with you since you're here. Your book rewrites or rethinks Ovid's Metamorphosis through the prism of this ecological sensibility with the non-human creatures who we share the world with. Can you tell us about how those two ideas kind of collided or came together for you?
Yeah.
Oh.
Are we on? Hello.
Should be on.
It's not as strong as the other one. You just have to hold it.
Here, will you?
Okay.
Yeah.
Is this okay?
Yeah,
That's great. Okay. I've been fascinated by Ovid for a long time because when I was a university student, I got taught by a magnificent woman named Vera Lachman. Vera Lachman had been, it's another case of injustice and the attempts to write it. Vera Lachman was a Jew who grew up in Germany in the late 1920s and 1930s. When Hitler outlawed Jews in the schools, she started up a school for Jews and managed to keep it going for 3 years until she had to run for her life, quite literally. Anyway, I encountered her when she was teaching at university, and she would take our class out to the lily pond that was on campus, and we would study Virgil and Ovid, and we would have our books, and she would have it all in her head. The entire Aeneid, the entire Ovid's Metamorphoses. And this was such an example of what you do with a precious cargo in terrible times. And everybody who's been telling stories tonight, I think, has something similar happening. The precious cargo of their own identity, basically, and what happens in terrible times. So that was one hinge. And the other one was my getting interested in animals and their capacities, which we've sort of anthropomorphized into the background. The way in which a house dog has powers of scent and sometimes powers of vision that far transcend what we have. And what I wanted to do was bring together that modern awareness of the whole animal world, as if we weren't part of it, the whole animal world out there with the metamorphoses, and look at those changes that Ovid focuses on, not as punishment, not as deprivation, but as an access to a whole new way of looking at life.
Thank you. My next question is for Valérie and Kama. I loved your reading. I loved that passage of the book as well, and how the language just kind of jumps off the page. I was curious, though, when you said you were going to be doing a bilingual reading, I had kind of assumed that you would be reading in French and you would be reading in English, but you flipped the script. I guess my question is, even though the translation is so amazing, why did you feel you needed a translator? Your English seems quite strong. No offense, of course.
Because I needed a job. And Val was like, translate my book.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead if you want.
Yeah, ultimately, I mean, I think, like in this heat, in this space, I feel restored to my most like primal form of just like energy, and I think also like going through the readings, hearing people's voices resonate in the space. There's something interesting about like seeing how, and this has been the like creative challenge all along, like taking that voice, rendering it in yours, and having 1,000 conversations in between, you know. And I think there's something about like how do you render like not just like the shape of the narrative, but also like the tone and then the resonance. I think that's interesting. It's worthwhile. I would translate your work just to see what could come of it, you know. So.
Great, thank you. And I wanted to ask a question for Maxime and Ted as well. And my question is pretty basic. I mean, your book is so thought-provoking. And I guess I was just curious how your collaboration took form. Comment votre collaboration a commencé, pris forme?
Well, yeah, maybe we can both talk about how we came to be together and how we both came into that encounter with our own ideas about what we might get out of it. The short story is that, you know, when I moved to Montreal in 2010, I learned a lot from Haitian activists in Montreal Nord about the police, about systemic racism, and about the real harm that is done by this category gang de rue, street gang, which of course, like, in another world, that could really just mean, you know, any group of people who organize themselves into a group and maybe are involved in some criminality. But in Montreal and Toronto, it's a signifier for black, and it's an unlimited category. So, you know, the police in 2008 had a list of gang members in Montreal that had 10,000 names on it, which is just preposterous, you know? So in the eyes of the police, any young black person is a potential gang member. And so to me, as, you know, a writer, a researcher, and an activist, it seemed really important to destroy that narrative that there's an easy association between this category and black and other racialized people. I also knew from Haitian activists in Montreal Nord that the first couple of Haitian gangs were self-defense groups, groups that organized to fight white racists. And I eventually started asking around, and someone said, well, if you want to understand the first Haitian gang, you gotta track down Maxime Aurélien. And I found him on Facebook. It's no big, you know, PI effort to find him, and yes, c'est ça. And we met up to have brunch, and I thought I would ask a few questions, and that might be it. But we spent 2 or 3 hours together, and really enjoyed the conversation. And at the end of it, Maxime said, you know, I'd really like the history of my gang to be written, and I was like, well, we have to do that. But I think Maxime, tu étais dans un moment particulier dans ta vie aussi.
Oui, puis je voulais aussi qu'on en parle parce que dans le temps, il y avait vraiment le racisme, tu sais, à cause de toi, au moins ça a sorti parce que le monde, tu sais, on marchait dans le métro, le monde se faisait cracher dessus, se faisait traiter de noms, des insultes, tu sais, des madames qui se faisaient battre. Puis nous, on était les jeunes dans la rue qui se promenaient un peu partout. Fait qu'on découvrait la ville, puis en même temps, ben on se battait contre les skinheads, les motards, les Anglais, tu sais, qui nous traitaient de noms. Fait que c'est comme ça qu'on a fait notre chemin, mais on n'a jamais créé de gang criminelle là, pour, comme les motards ou les Hells Angels, les Rock Machines. On était un groupe d'amis. C'était tout.
I'd like to open up the floor to any questions from anyone who's here. Does anyone want to ask a question to any of our readers? Do we have the ability to take questions from the folks watching at home, or is that okay? All right. Well, I know we're all a little overheated. Well, so I'll give you a moment to think about it, but you know, this is your chance to ask a question of one of the distinguished readers right here on the stage. Going once, going twice. Well, thank you all so much for coming and being here with us, and thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate all you readers, all you authors, and I appreciate you all coming here on this sweltering night to be in the space with us, and for all the folks watching at home, thank you very much as well. Buy some books, hang around, you can ask questions one-on-one if you want, or just hang out and chat for a little while longer. Thank you all. And I wanted to ask, by Rebecca's request, if any past or present members of the MRB staff wanted to come up for a picture together. You don't all have to watch, but we want to do it together. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.